Every organization we talk to has been told to do something with AI. The mandate is do something, but the data security elements are a huge part of this, and a lot of organizations are so intent on getting something out of AI immediately that they skip over the data governance piece. There's a concept of being transparent and accountable, just like a supply chain concept of I can explain everything in my supply chain from a product perspective. From an AI perspective, we need to be able to explain where the data came from, how it got trained, what models are in use.
This is a big problem. So I'm thinking, you're shaking your head. I got here. How do you approach this problem? Welcome everybody to another episode of IT Visionaries. And today I have a special guest. He is the Chief Information and Security Officer. Yes, CISO. I say it sometimes, but I always want to say the full title, Mark, because you never know who's listening and tuning in and be like, I don't know what that means. At a company called Trace3, that's TRACE3. Mark, welcome to the show.
Thanks. Appreciate being here.
Listen, for our audience who may not know or has not heard of Trace3, can you please tell us what is Trace3 and what does it do?
Yeah, Albert, it's a great question because Trace3 has been around for 20 plus years. We started in California and we're making our way across the country from an acquisition and growth perspective. But ultimately, we're a service integrator, a reseller, and a technology VAR that's focused on services and value delivery. So it's not just about the acquisition of technology, but it's about the value you're getting out of it based on the investments you made. And that's really where we're focused.
And do you have a specialized focus of industry or customer type?
So I support healthcare, fintech, retail. We support clients of all types and varieties. We have teams all across the country, focused on cloud, data, security, analytics, management consulting practice as well. So a lot of different disciplines, but we support all verticals and all industries.
So, the biggest buzz in news right now, imagine seamless customer experiences, fast internet, and the bandwidth required to embrace new technologies. Are you ready to experience the network that makes it all possible? There's no network quite like Zayo's. With North America's largest independently owned fiber network, Zayo provides the backbone, connecting your organization to what's next. Thousands of data centers to cloud on-ramps, towers, and points of presence. Zayo's network carries massive amounts of data globally every single day. What really sets Zayo apart is their coast-to-coast routes spanning from Canada into Mexico that you simply won't find anywhere else. The most innovative companies choose Zayo because they are not just connecting places, but connecting what's next for you. Discover the power of Zayo's network today. www.zayo.com/network. There's two things that are happening, right? Or there's always a handful of things happening, but right now, of course, the acceleration of artificial intelligence, every industry is starting to see this. There's also more concerns about security, cybersecurity. I think that is never going to go away. That's going to continuously increase. And so it introduces this new domain where I think you play quite well in, which is this idea behind validation, certification, veracity. Like there is now this new problem that I think all companies are dealing with, which is what is, and it's bending the consumer truly, like what is real? And give us an idea how companies are approaching new projects. Because you recently posted on LinkedIn about how, according to a study by Gartner, organizations are struggling, I think, to implement AI in an effective way, in relative comparison to how much it's in the news.
No, Albert, that's spot on because every organization we talk to has been told to do something with AI, right? The mandate is do something. The next set of the conversation is, okay, well, what kind of products and services do you offer? And then how do you want to start thinking about adopting, testing, analyzing options, right? Because you can adopt AI within the products that you leverage inside the organization from an AI assistant standpoint.
Yes.
Or you can adopt AI from, a chat perspective if you have chat agents. Or you can build, an entirely new product or service on a foundational LLM, right? Which then you have to decide, do I want to do the open source LLM or do I want to build my own and use all my company data to train it? And so there's a really long journey most organizations would have to undergo to do their own thing, their own version of the LLM with their own data sets. Even though that's probably the most useful long-term, the reality is the time that it takes to do that has to be compressed. And that's why most organizations are testing out open source LLMs or public LLMs and trying to run those on premise or, in a restricted area, right? So that's the biggest mandate, is do something with AI, but then you got to unpack that with those teams and the services and the products that the companies offer. So much potential and a lot of tension and a lot of like, oh my gosh, we have to do something. Let's figure this out. And even with the models changing so fast and the capabilities, we're seeing a lot of abstraction almost of access to AI. And I think we're going to continue to see that abstraction where AI is just offered as a service or a set of services. And most companies aren't going to be in the fine tuning of models. They're going to be in the scenarios of how they apply the models to, or how they want to take benefit of what AI offers from a, speed and delivery and decision making and, data analysis standpoint.
When I think of how this could possibly, or these projects get started, there's usually and I'm assuming this is where you play a part for sure, is that initial assessment phase where it says, hey, how do we even architect this system to do this? And inevitably there's going to be questions of I'm sure security, right? So of course they want to make sure the data that they have in their data set still remains private. There's going to be a level of, I say it like validity. I think that is going to be a big one, which is like, okay, so that if an AI comes to a conclusion, is it a good one? Is it a valid one? How do we verify that? And then the third layer I can think of right out the gate that can be problematic is like how do you know that the data being used is actually the right data? Meaning, even if it's ours, but if Gen AI can create its own data, am I training my AI off of poorly created data? And so it creates like this, like almost like inception of like, well, what is real? And this is what I think of in terms of like what risk factors that have to be solved. What do you come into when you talk to companies like, hey, these are the things that you have to implement and figure out first before we even can break ground or so on?
Right. And so what we typically have to do is understand the direction and the intention and the pace of what they want to try to do. And then we have to peel that back and say, okay, are you using your own data set to train a model, or are you just trying to use AI assistance within, existing SaaS products? But the governance piece of AI is a huge focus area. And, there's a lot of legislation being talked about. There's the EU AI Act that's getting close to being passed. There's a concept of being transparent and accountable, right, from a AI training perspective. So there's all these different areas of convergence, ultimately, of AI governance, AI data management, training, and then, having this concept of explainability, which is an interesting term, but it's basically like, okay, just like a supply chain, concept of I can explain everything in my supply chain from a product perspective, from an AI perspective, we need to be able to explain where the data came from, how it got trained, what models are in use. It may even get to the point of, the fine tuning of the models on weightings and, the internal algorithm tuning that happens, which is yet to be seen, but it could go down that path. But, the data security elements are a huge part of this. And a lot of organizations are so intent on getting something out of AI immediately that they skip over, the data governance piece. And they're testing, certain scenarios with maybe limited data sets. And to your point, until you get the prompts written or the agent interaction with AI to get that output and say, oh, this output doesn't look quite right, or it's not what I expected, or it has some additional information in it that I wasn't expecting. Then you have to go back and say, okay, well, maybe there's some data that it looked at that I wasn't aware of. Because we're seeing scenarios of like, ask the AI platform, give me the salary of the head of the IT department, right? And see if it's in the data set somewhere, right? So there's all these scenarios that internal document review, research and development documents, IP documents. Like there's all this internal data that if you turn on an AI assistant and it looks out at OneDrive and Box and SharePoint and everything else possible, obviously it's going to have some sensitive proprietary data in there. And that's what we have to be careful about, of how we're applying those models, and then what the scenarios are for, any type of outside or client interaction, or anything that model could be used for outside the company.
I think Google recently got, I wouldn't call it slam, but kind of made fun of, because someone asked like, what's the best pizza recipe? And it clearly searched and indexed food artists because it says it needs glue.
Yes.
And glue makes the cheese stretchier.
Yeah.
Right. And so it's like, it's right, but it's also not right. Right. Like, yes, glue does, for anyone who's not familiar with this, we'll link the article, but it found an article that suggests how they make food art, meaning like, how do they make the commercials? And in the commercials, it's not actually cheese, it's glue. And that's what creates that tacky like look when they pull it up. Yeah. And it made the recommendation.
Screen, but yeah, don't eat it.
Yeah. And so like, there's this thing where it's like, okay, I have all the information, but it doesn't really have a way to like evaluate who's more valid or who's more accurate. It hasn't figured that out yet. Whereas like it figured out PageRank. PageRank's like, well, these are the pages that most people go to and stay on. And that's why this is the more valid information or search result, but it can't know that with just data.
Right. Yeah. And context is the biggest piece of this whole, value story, because if the AI models can bring context to the answers and give you the answers in sub-seconds that obviously help the scenarios of why you're using AI, then that's the holy grail of AI, is like context, value, and speed. So we can get on to other things, right? And not have to do these routine tasks. But context is the hardest part from a training perspective, to make sure that it's applicable to that scenario that obviously would make sense, because nobody wants to eat pizza with glue. So,
yeah.
Absolutely.
So you're on the InfoSec side. And this is where I think I want to ask you about is, so let's apply that same thought process to like sensitive information. How is that going to be figured out in the future? You kind of hinted at it with like, extracting information from documents. That's going to be hugely beneficial. I think most people, when they review legal documents or contracts, they can be complicated, right? And takes a lot of time to figure these things out. And AI could potentially help us quite a bit. How will these tools, or how should these tools, in your opinion, be governed to know like what is easily extractable and should be shared? So based on like, I guess, user access role, I don't know how that would work. And how would you catalog and tag it all to do that? This is a big problem. So I'm thinking you're shaking your head. I got here. How do you approach this problem?
Yeah. So there's at least 3 aspects to, data security and AI. First of all, there's the interaction with the AI interfaces and the prompts and the agents, right? So there's tooling that's been built to say, hey, we're going to kind of act like a browser plugin, or act like an agent on your desktop to say, okay, how are you interacting with the AI tooling? What are you giving access to from a data perspective internally? And then are you doing anything from an interaction perspective that would be considered unusual, or maybe sharing data with the AI model that you shouldn't? So there's this whole desktop, laptop user, experience focus. So there's a lot of startups in that space. So think about like, browser security or, AI interface security. There's that whole element, and there's obviously role-based access control there, as well as who's interacting with the models, and then how are they interacting with the models, and what data could be allowed access, for the model to ingest and put in its training, and so that's kind of the interaction side. The other piece is what data sets in mass are being loaded into the models. And so typically this is somebody that's not using a chat GPT just for personal use. This is like, we have our own instance, and we're training our entire company data set from a customer experience standpoint into the model so we can make our chat, experience better. And so, there's the data set to be concerned about of what's being uploaded and then how it's referenced. There's the user interaction with the AI models, but then there's also the testing process. So it's not just writing better prompts and writing better queries to the AI models. It's really gonna morph into agents that are doing this for us. And the agents are writing prompts, getting feedback, refining the prompts, and doing it for us. So really, we're moving from individuals doing prompts to get queries and information back to agents doing prompts. So, it's like the AI agent is doing prompts to get feedback, and then it will review the responses, tweak the queries, and then, write new prompts. So there's this kind of evolution of, and then that requires oversight and guidance too. So, most organizations are still trying to figure out, AI access policies, what's their governance approach going to be? Because unfortunately, there's not a rule book or like a manual to say, here's how to do AI governance.
We're all kind of learning as we go, right?
Yeah. It's, it's ask a lot of questions, go in with eyes wide open, and then be ready for, what are you going to learn? And then how are you going to adjust, for sure. So a lot of different aspects of that question, but hopefully that helps.
Yeah. When you say agent, what do you mean by agent? Because you use individuals and then you say agents. What is effectively an agent?
If you're using the AI's either API or you have an AI agent running as an instance, like there's this concept of agentification. It's a newer concept, but it's basically like, I'm going to have an AI agent doing queries and have a routine set of queries running and getting responses back, and then helping the agents refine, instead of a person having an agent do it. So you're basically telling an agent to do a series of tasks and then guiding the next steps. And so the intent there is to have the agent speed up the process versus us manually writing prompts, getting responses, reviewing them, and then writing, revised prompts. So we're still very early in that, agent, leveraging agents for that whole process. So it's just something that's literally being tested and coming out right now. So we haven't seen it in use a lot, but it's the direction that we're seeing from a scale perspective.
Which industries do you think are most poised to deliver something to customers that they can tangibly see that there's a serious improvement based on AI models and the new acceleration? Because I think about, I just had this experience actually. I just had this experience. It was in fintech. I won't name the client or I won't name the business, but it handles vendor payments. And their chat support it's got to be the worst chat support in the history of chat support. I mean, we're talking about worse than cable companies. Like it is about as useless as it gets. And I just kept thinking to myself, like, how is this not better? Like, why can't this be better now? Which industry? Because we hear of all the promises as consumers. We hear about all these promises. Which industries do you see adopting and implementing useful solutions in the next, hopefully now or as soon as possible, where us, the general consumer, the public, we're going to clearly notice like, wow, this is getting way better.
Yeah. Anybody that has a contact center, collaboration, contact and collab center, anybody that has any type of customer service, chat bots that need to get replaced because they were probably generation 1 or generation 2 chatbot, that just have a very limited set of interaction and a very limited, ability to help at the end of the day. I will say fintech is ripe for sure. Healthcare, I think, will surpass everybody here soon. There's all kinds of these scenarios of, not only healthcare research of what's possible from a drug and treatment perspective, but the experience. Obviously, you can you can go get all kinds of different healthcare services virtually, but the whole process of interaction, recommendations, billing, and then follow through from a treatment perspective, I think we're going to see massive shifts from a healthcare experience standpoint. And then I will say anybody that's dealing with a large set of repositories of documents, we're seeing all this, we're seeing with legal firms and other entities that have a huge number of documents they need to either reference and look at from a research perspective and then process information out of, or ones that will do, billing and reconciliation and follow up, from a accounts receivable standpoint. So I think those are probably, the best examples, but even in energy and, oil energy sectors, we're seeing agents monitor, field equipment and being able to make fine-tune adjustments on things that were never able to be done before, just based on, equipment monitoring and then obviously flows of, chemicals and et cetera. But then being able to fine-tune things in a much faster way to save either operational costs or, exposure loss of, product or chemicals or whatever. So even in the oil, gas, energy spaces, we're seeing a lot of different operational impacts from AI, analyzing basically sensor data to tell you, what should be adjusted before there's a, major shift in something.
When I hear because you mentioned early on that you work with different health companies or the healthcare industry, and I think to myself about that's the industry where I think is I agree with you, is most able to get the benefits of it. When I think of it as like early detection, so a great example, of course, is like cancer screening. I think everyone knows cancer screening, the sooner the better, but the sooner you catch something, the more likely it can be treated. However, the hard part is a lot of cancer screening for anyone who's, is aware of the process or unaware of the process. It does rely on the human eyeball. The doctor is making a visual assessment. So a single point of view is making a visual assessment of is there a presence or not the presence of some type of malignant tissue, right? Or they'll have to, take a sample of it if they can and go to the lab. But I think of colonoscopy is done it's kind of done visually. You know what I mean? It's done visually. They do the blood test, but it's kind of done visually. And I think the ability to identify these things sooner, quicker, with more accuracy could really transform health outcomes.
Yeah, absolutely. Yep. I think we have an AI and healthcare summit coming up, and there's so many available topics we have to fine tune. Okay, we can't cover everything, but there's literally so many scenarios that are super exciting from an application standpoint. And so, yeah, it's I think healthcare is going to be impacted sooner and to a higher degree and more volume of scenarios, that are going to benefit for sure.
It was not too long ago on IT Visionaries that we had some team members from AWS come and talk to us about how many companies or workloads, have actually made it to the cloud. And at the time, they estimated it was under 20%. And I'm pretty confident it's still a relatively low number. It's going to be lower than what most people think it is. I know that, right? I think if, for example, if you're a young engineer and you're working on a cloud native software company, you probably think that 85, 90% of workloads are in the cloud. I'm telling you, it's not even close. But in order to take advantage of a lot of these services, you kind of have to be there. Give me an idea, because I saw that as one of the things that Trace3 is, a service that Trace3 helps to implement. How many more companies are coming out of the woodwork because they want to not miss this next wave, saying, hey, I got to get my workloads to the cloud because otherwise I don't really have a chance to take advantage of these secondary agents and services and LLMs. Like, it's not even possible. You got it all in your own data center.
Right. Yeah, we're seeing two camps. The first camp is a cloud friendly, cloud native, startup mentality of like, hey, I don't have any legacy infrastructure. I don't have any tech debt I need to worry about. I don't have a data center I need to migrate from. So those are the easy conversations. They're already cloud oriented and enabled in multi clouds. So the multi-cloud conversation is a lot easier to deal with from an architecture, engagement, et cetera perspective. Now, for the ones that have the tech debt and the multiple data centers and haven't migrated maybe their crown jewel workloads to the cloud, we're seeing a pause there, because if these companies have all their data on premise in on-premise databases, they want to train LLM models with that data that's on premise.
Oh, okay.
They're going to basically either subscribe to an AI service offering that's internal, that's being purchased. So, GPUs and custom hardware and everything else is being purchased to be put on premise. And that data, that's the most important to that business, is going to train that LLM model on premise. So everything will be retained in that environment, right? So it's very interesting. So there's a little bit of repatriation here and there, depending on, if a workload was moved to the cloud and never actually rewritten to be cloud native from an architectural perspective. They just did a lift and shift, and they're like, we're not really seeing the performance we want. We're not seeing the cost savings we want, and we haven't had time to rewrite it from scratch. We're seeing a little bit of repatriation here and there, but that's typically for the lift and shift applications. But this whole like, hey, let's do our own LLM on premise and train it with our custom data set. That's where we're seeing the build out of, basically in-house LLMs servicing sensitive data, and they're controlling the environment, who has access to it, who can interact with it. Obviously working with, data scientists to fine tune models with their data sets. But it's all within the customer's environment ultimately.
Mark, I think you just explained why on NVIDIA's last earnings call, they were just like, we just cannot keep up with demand, because not only are all the major clouds, all the public and private clouds demanding their GPUs, you've now just clearly stated all the workloads that haven't actually even made it there want their own GPUs too.
Yeah, everybody wants their GPUs, whether it's a technology partner who's packaging, right, an AI tech stack. So just think of an AI tech stack in a rack or multiple racks to be put in the environment, right? Or it's the cloud companies wanting to run their own, GPUs as a service. Everybody wants a GPU, and there we go.
Oh man. Okay. So if anyone, this is not stock advice, but it does not sound like the NVIDIA demand will slow down anytime soon. No different from what they stated on their earnings call. Pretty crazy. I did not realize that is actually what is happening. That was pretty insightful. So what does this do? Because there's been like I'm going to call it a shift in work because the tech industry has had probably more layoffs in the last 2 years than, let's say, some of the other industries. And, people are feeling it, but it feels like there's really a shift in skill that's now being required. That's really, because based on what you just said, there is no way there's enough people to do this. Right. So it's like everyone who, I don't know what your approach, like, let's say you were a front end engineer and you knew JavaScript. Maybe you have to learn something else. I don't know. Like, that's the way it feels based on what you're saying. What are you seeing in regards to like skill demand? Because it's not actually, like people are always afraid AI is taking jobs. I was like, well, maybe, but it's more like it's moving jobs. What is the new skill demand? What is the skill workforce looking like? And how do you recruit? That's a big question.
Yeah, I would say, first of all, AI is not directly taking jobs. AI will create a different style of opportunities. But first of all, the this has been the biggest shift in the entire history of technology. Bigger than cloud, bigger than mobile, like bigger than the
Okay.
internet. Like just
Bigger than the
it,
internet?
I would say bigger than the internet. Yes.
That's impressive. I got to hear this now.
I mean, okay. So at Trace 3, let's just give you an example, right? We have 1,400 employees at Trace 3. We have over 800 engineers that work at Trace 3 in all kinds of different disciplines. And the balance of those people are in, support roles and sales roles and account, management roles. So Trace 3, as a technology advisory and consulting shop, we're going through our internal Legends. We call it a Legends training program, but it's basically fundamentals of AI, how AI is being used, from an industry perspective. Where's the evolution of the models going? And then what are the top scenarios that we can help clients with, right? And so this is literally a 101 training for AI for all of Trace 3, for all 1,400 of us. Then we're going to have technical tracks beyond that. Obviously for the engineering side of the house, that's going to be like helping with model selection and helping with, tuning models, or helping with scenario matching, helping with, they call it multimodal, depending on if you're doing text and video and, other ways of interaction with the models. If Trace 3 is doing all this internal training for AI, just think about a large corporation that's like, oh, well, we have an AI team, right? And maybe 3 people, maybe 30 people, maybe 300 people, but the rest of the organization is literally standing by and saying, hey guys, like, how does this impact my world? Right.
Yeah.
And so there's pockets of testing, pockets of, evaluation, obviously, progress depending on the organization, to a big degree or a small degree. But there's so much anticipation, anxiety, and like, oh my gosh, we know this is coming. I don't know what it's going to look like. So unless you're in the mix of like all the daily, AI news and AI, interpretation of what's happening, and it's literally changing every single day. I think there's this natural hesitation and or anxiety and or like, okay, I'm gonna experience AI within, my Microsoft Office Copilot application, and it'll help me do certain things during the day. I'm gonna experience AI with, maybe companies that are enabling it from a chatbot or contact center collaboration, et cetera, perspective. Let's say I'm a security analyst in a operations center. I want to write better queries to get data out of my SIM because I need to detect threats in the environment and respond faster. Well, AI can help me write better SQL queries or whatever the language is of my SIM, right? And so I can get that data faster and spend less time doing, query optimization, right? So depending on the scenario and who you are, and like if you're a developer, a platform engineer, a database architect, a security operations center resource, whether I'm, developers that write code faster, it's like, okay, well, now it's like 70% of developers are either testing AI to develop code, or they're reviewing code that's already been developed from an AI, model, and then they're QAing it to make sure it's functionally, accurate, right?
Yeah.
So long story short, we're in this transition. It's going to be a lot of uneasiness. It's going to have some anxiety related to it, and it's okay. Like, all this change is, ultimately for the good, but I think we have to get used to the tension. We have to get used to the anxiety, and we have to get used to change. And we have to quickly like reorient ourselves to say, okay, what do I need to learn? What do I need to expose myself to? And then what do I need to keep in mind as, all this is evolving, if that helps. So Most organizations, I think small pockets of teams are really looking at AI and how to evolve and how to use. But the other parts of the organizations are just, status quo, doing their own thing. But, as a advisory and technology firm, we're trying to be on this front end of this, so we can help coach, advise, and lead, the options that are available. And it's very, very quickly moving. And, the other thing I'll say is the adversarial part of AI, which is a whole nother probably 2-hour topic, of how organizations are trying to use AI in a negative way or a harmful way. There's been a couple different articles just in the last few days of Meta turning off different, users of AI to do, data poisoning or influencing, public opinion about certain things. Google was doing the same thing. So, as elections near this fall, it's going to get really interesting on, who has a real profile, who's posting things that, is a real person, what type of influence are they trying to, make from information or advice perspective. And then there's the whole attack scenario of like, hey, I want to go attack a company. So give me all the tech stack, give me all the intelligence, give me all the reconnaissance. How should I best break into this company, right? From a technical perspective. And so that whole process is getting sped up as well, which makes the defender job, even more challenging. But now the defenders have AI as well to figure out new attack scenarios, and how they can respond better. So it's a little bit of this escalation war, for sure, but we're going to see, a lot of, social impacts as well.
I made a joke a long time ago that the future of legal defense is you're going to talk to an AI and tell it to like defend you, and the prosecution is going to tell and then tell the AI to counter. And it's going to be two AIs that battle each other and a judge just like, what is happening? I joked about that. I personally, hearing you say this, it just reinforces my my personal belief that there is the next great industry or the next big industry that doesn't quite, I don't think it quite exists, but there's going to be like almost like a verification industry where it's like, am I real? Is this real? Is this from a legitimate person? Because if the software itself can create information, which could then be used to train a model that you then depend on for accurate information to make a decision, it has to know where it comes from. It has to know who has created it. And we're already seeing like, people are easily fooled. Like there was that one of our other guests talked about that the picture of the Pope wearing like that like puffy jacket, right? And people are like, yeah, the Pope's got swag.
Like, oh,
okay. Right? It's like almost like you wanted to believe it was real, but like it shows how quick people are to just believe what they see.
right.
And I've kind of tell my kids now, it's like in this, I think as of right now, nothing is real. Like, it sounds bad, but it's like, you really have to know the source. Like, who is the source? What is their intention? And so I think this verification industry I think it's going to exist. I mean, I've also heard like, Elon Musk go on record saying he thinks that like X should charge money for all users because it makes it harder to create fake accounts if you had to pay every single time. But of course, people aren't used to that yet. But I don't know when people will get used to like this idea that I want everything verified because I want to trust what I see. I don't know when we'll get there.
Well, it's funny. I was on a Zoom call the other day, and we were testing out different kind of scenarios. So there was an individual on the call. Let's just call him John for his own protection. He took an image of a coworker. Because he has his image, from multiple videos. He also took his voice because he has several recordings, right? Yeah. So in real time on the Zoom call, he overlaid the other person's face, right? And he changed his voice to basically, act like the other person. And so it wasn't like, it wasn't perfectly smooth and perfectly like, the delivery wasn't like 100%, but in just a few minutes, it looks like if, it's a little grainy and it's a little, jerky here and there, but It doesn't look like the original person. It looks like the guy he's impersonating. And if you're not paying attention and he's on a little tiny, square, you could assume it was the other person. So we've already seen scenarios of people making payments and losing money and doing other stuff.
I was going to say that, like this, that's what validation, verification. I don't know how it works, but I feel like it's a new industry. It's funny you mentioned that, and people are always like, "Well, you can still tell." I'm like, and I always push back on people and say, this technology is in its infancy. Like in 10 years, you're not going to be able to tell. Like it's going to be that good. OpenAI recently got slapped on the wrist when it came forward that their audio model was based off of Scarlett Johansson. But I was thinking to myself, had they not asked her, I don't think she'd have a case.
They asked her twice. Yeah, they asked her twice.
But had they never asked her? Because how many times have you heard or said, "Hey, you sound like."
Yep.
Right.
Yeah.
Like some people say, "Your son sounds just like you," and I'm like, "Oh, well." So if I had created a voice, but it could be completely modeled off Scarlett Johansson, but I just didn't ask her, I could say it's whatever.
Right. And why would you put out a statement that said "her," which references a movie where she actually played an AI voice right before the launch of the voice that sounds like her?
Yeah. So they I think they apologized and they're going to change the voice, but a voice isn't that unique in my opinion. And so you really could just take someone else's voice and not pay $1 for it.
Right.
Which is a different thing, but we're entering I'm going to go lean on good. There was a study I read, which I thought was really good. And it talked about how are we better off today than we were 100 years ago? And it's like by every definitive measure, the answer is yes. Like things have gotten better. So while AI is going to open the doors for some things, no question, there's always going to be bad actors that are going to take advantage of it. I think in general, things are going to be better. And so I'll have to lean on that. And I think you would agree that is what's going to happen. Although right now we're in this, I guess a lot of questions. A lot of people have questions right now.
Absolutely. No, I agree. I mean, it's absolutely going to be beneficial in so many ways. I think, whether we all have personal robots running around the house or, all that stuff, it's TBD. But I'm an optimist at heart, but I work in in an industry that takes a lot of detection, response, and recovery types of activities. And so I'm never not surprised. I'm like, oh wow, that was a creative attack, or I hadn't put those pieces together yet, but I'm seeing this type of scenario from a risk standpoint that we need to figure out. So on one hand, I'm kind of the eternal optimist, just from an attitude perspective. On the other hand, I have to deal with all these crazy scenarios of well, how'd you get in again?
Yeah,
and what was the combination or the sequence or the scenario that we need to solve for? So, it's like the creative side of problem solving. And then it's like the eternal optimist of, hey, let's use this for a greater good and, for everyone's benefit.
I will say we have officially arrived when we can all have our own Jarvis, straight out of Iron Man. And the reason why I say that is because Jarvis can build. So you know what I mean? Instead of paying your HVAC technician to install a brand new HVAC, which is right now 17 grand, you just have Jarvis make you one. Make one. So now all you're paying for is raw metal. Because when we can have our own builders, that will be sick. But
Nice.
Well, Mark, I got some questions for you also, because I think one of the things about IT Visionaries is we also let our audience get to know you personally. So I got some personal questions. So some fun questions, nothing too revealing. We're going to keep your PII safe. Don't worry about it. But let's get to know you a little bit outside of work. So Mark, you're clearly a dog lover. We saw you on a previous podcast where you snuck a dog in, Zero Trust, under your jacket. You have a dog in your LinkedIn profile. Your dog talked to us before we started. What's your dog's name?
Ava. She's
Ava.
She's 5 years old. She's a mini petite golden doodle. So she's about 23, 25 pounds. So yeah.
Have you always been a dog person, or is this a newer pet?
Yeah, my wife and I decided to get so we both had dogs in the past. We decided to get one together, and we chose Ava. We had her shipped across the country, and ever since we got her, it's been a blast. It's been great.
How many vehicles have you smuggled her into? We saw one. We can verify one.
That was great. That was with our marketing team, and it was I forgot the dog's name, a little white dog of our marketing team. And so I put her in my jacket and I snuck her into the car, and I was like, this is a zero trust scenario because I have something that you didn't know about, but I'm already, in the environment. Right. So yeah, that was a fun scenario to give an example of, identities and logins and access to the environment and, oh, I brought something you didn't expect. Now what are you going to do? Yeah.
There you go. And you mentioned before that you are currently residing in Irvine, California.
Yeah. So Tracery is based in Irvine. I'm out of Phoenix, Arizona.
Oh, you're out of Phoenix.
Yeah. So I'm just a little bit, an hour flight, and very accessible.
My brother lives in the Tempe area, which I know is not quite Phoenix, but it's close enough. If someone was to go visit Phoenix, what would you recommend them go see or go do? And also, where should they go eat?
Oh, wow. There's a new place called the Grand Ambassador right by Camelback Mountain. I would definitely recommend the Grand Ambassador. It's not only a hotel, it's like 5 different restaurants, but the entire rooftop is open, and it's the largest rooftop in Arizona. So I definitely recommend the Grand Ambassador. If you're a sushi fan, I would recommend Across the Pond. It's a little hole in the wall in central Phoenix, but excellent sushi. There's all kinds of, there's a Gallo Blanco. It's a great Mexican place. There's all kinds of good, really good Michelin star restaurants around Phoenix. So I would definitely do some research, and, we have a good foodie scene here. So I would definitely, recommend options, but whether it's Italian, Mexican, Asian, or fusion, we're seeing a lot of different fusion restaurants as well. So definitely do some research, but reach out and I can help give you a short list.
All right. Now, when you said you live in Phoenix, like I said, my brother lives in the area too. When did you learn that you love the heat?
Okay, so by the end of it's 100 degrees right now, right? We're in May. So as you go into June, July, and August, you are like, okay, it's getting hotter and hotter and hotter. If you're out running around during the day, getting in and out of your hot car, or if you're sitting on the tarmac, roasting before you get up in the air because you're heading somewhere, those are the 2 worst scenarios of being in the heat. You can literally be in your pool, outside, interacting, hanging out, doing whatever. It could be 105 or below, and you're totally fine. So the numbers don't equate to how it feels just because of the dryness. But you can literally get out of your pool. It's 105 degrees. You're in the shade and you're cold. And it's just the most bizarre thing. But if you're in the sun, you're fine. So, the dry heat and the evaporation of the water on your body is very interesting, because you can literally get out of a pool that's 95 degrees and the air temp's 105 or 110, and you can be cold in the shade. But yeah, by August and September, we're usually ready to go somewhere for a few weeks or a month, just to get some change of scenery for sure.
There you go. Well, Mark, it was awesome having you today on IT Visionaries. Thanks for sharing a little bit about your opinions and what some of the things you guys are trying to accomplish. I'm with you. I think we share similar opinions on what's going to happen. I don't have the problem that you have of recruiting, retaining talent, and helping people figure this out. But I'm glad people like you are doing the thing.
Yep. Thanks, Albert. Appreciate the time.
Awesome. Thanks for joining us today on IT Visionaries. Imagine a world where your data flows like electricity, unseen, yet powering everything you do. A world where high availability, low latency, and disaster recovery are not just expectations, but realities. Welcome to the future, powered by Zayo's network. Zayo has meticulously designed North America's largest independent fiber network, a network that isn't just vast, but strategically planned, connecting the places that matter most to you. Thousands of data centers, cloud on-ramps, towers, and critical points of presence. Cross-continental routes unique to Zayo offer connections that you just can't find anywhere else. Zayo provides routing diversity that ensures your operations never skip a beat, and ultra-low latency for when microseconds matter. In a world that never stops, Zayo is the network underneath it all, helping the most innovative and forward-thinking companies grow. Because Zayo doesn't just connect places, they connect possibilities. Discover the power of Zayo's network today. Visit www.zayo.com/network.